Okay. All right, Minister Edwards, we are going to get started. So we will start as we try to always do, certainly with prayer. So if you will lead us, we'll get started.
Let us go before the throne of Almighty God. Our God and our Father, we give thanks to you, Lord, for yet another day. We pray now, Father, that you would allow your Holy Spirit to be in our midst. We ask, Father, that you would grant us clarity of vision and purpose. God, allow all of the participants to speak with eloquence, oh God. We ask that you would continue to be the wind beneath our wings. May you allow your Holy Spirit to dwell in and amongst your people. In Christ Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
We want to make sure that we have a real understanding, because the time is now. It is election season. I don't have to tell anybody that. I apologize for my lighting. I'm not at home, and so the lights flickering in and out. Can't do anything about that right now. But anyway, it's going crazy in Tallahassee, which is going to have something to do with us and how we're able to proceed and vote or not vote. So I wanted to have our supervisor of elections, Mr. Joe Scott, come and share with us some of the things that he is implementing, some of the things that he's changed, he's continued to know what's going on within his office. Most of you know that the NAACP and other organizations have always had a good, well, let me say, since Ms. Oliphant on, have had a good working relationship with the Supervisor of Elections office. And so we would hope to continue that as well. And there's no reason to think that that's not the case. And so with that, I want to introduce our own Broward County Supervisor of Elections, Mr. Joe Scott. Mr. Scott, you have the floor.
Good evening, everybody. Yes, as President Ellison mentioned, there is definitely a fight on in Tallahassee right now. There are two bills that are moving through the Florida legislature that, my biggest hope is that we can make it stop. Just make sure those bills don't pass, or at least try to push it off until next session and then continue the fight then. But let me tell you a little bit more about sort of what's at stake here. Actually, the bills were much worse about a month ago. When these bills were first introduced, there was just all kinds of craziness in them. And through a lot of good work and through a lot of people really fighting to try to get some of the craziness out of there, they actually got from being to a point that we were thinking it was going to be a disaster to where it's almost like it's still really, really bad and we really don't want it to pass, but it's not as bad as it could have been. But let me tell you what the biggest problem here is. The biggest problem I see is that they really want to make it so that you have to show an ID in order to drop off a vote by mail ballot at a drop box. Now, the biggest thing is that when we use drop boxes, people like to sometimes take in their ballots for other people, like other members of their family or their neighbors or other people from their church or something else. So, a lot of the ballots that we get collected at the drop box may not necessarily be the person who's dropping it off. It could be somebody else's ballots. And that's the benefit of the drop box. It's the neighbors helping neighbors. It's family members helping each other out to make sure that people are able to participate and vote. 243,000 people in Broward County used the drop box in 2020. So we're talking about a lot of votes from our community. And when you say that now we're going to make people show an ID, it just introduces confusion. Now, the law is going to allow for you to drop off other people's ballots, but it'll have to be a close family member, and then there's going to be a limit. But once you start making all these rules, it gets confusing. It'll be confusing both for the poll workers and it'll be confusing for the general public. And the overall result is going to be that we have fewer ballots that get turned in. And now, let me tell you more about what my office is doing to try to mitigate that. One thing that we already have in place that's already, that will be in effect in time for the special election that's coming up is that we are going to have, we're going to do better communication around the vote by mail ballots. So basically you can sign up for this new program. It's called Ballot Tracks. And basically you'll get a notification early on, when either when the ballot leaves our office or when it arrives at your home. We're still working out some of the details on exactly how we're going to, send out those messages. Then we're actually going to send everybody a reminder to remind them to send it back. And then we're going to give you a notification that your ballot has been returned and that it's been counted. Now, the purpose behind this, and these notifications can come by text message or email or robocall, and it'll be up to you to decide how you get your notifications. But the purpose behind this is to make people more confident in simply putting their ballot in the mailbox. Now, I've actually had an opportunity to spend some time with our local post office, some of the leadership of the local post office, and I really have a lot of confidence in these folks, that these folks are out to do the right thing and try to make sure that they get our ballots in as quickly as possible and try to process our mail. But if there was some kind of way to convey that trust and get that trust out to the community and get people to trust putting their ballot in the mail, that's really the best way to get it back to us. And I would love to see the trust level in the Postal Service go up. So hopefully through this Ballot Tracks program, people will feel more confident using vote by mail, and they won't feel the need as much to use the drop boxes, which the state is working hard to make it difficult for us to use those drop boxes. So that's one thing we're doing. The other thing is that they're trying to make it so that you have to continuously renew your request, which you didn't have to do in the past. So what we're going to do for that is that we're going to change our envelope. So there'll be a checkbox where you can request your next vote by mail ballot. So overall, and I want to wrap up because I know I've been talking for a while, but let me tell you, the overall idea is that they're basically coming up with ideas in Tallahassee to try to make it difficult for us to vote, to try to suppress our votes. But my office is working hard to find new ways to get more voter turnout and get more people engaged. And that's what we're doing to fight.
Karen, see if the email came through to you. See, try to get on. Okay.
Alice, can you mute yourself? Continue, Mr. Scott.
Oh, okay. Well, actually, so let me tell how much time did you want me to? Oh, you're on mute, President.
I want you to tell us about, I've heard a little bit about some of the new things that you're going to implement. I know you were looking at Adopt a Precinct. I know you were looking at some other things. So whatever you got going on, we want to know about it because we want to certainly be partners with you in this.
Okay, fantastic. I wanted to make sure I wasn't talking too long.
You are not.
All right, I appreciate it. So let me tell you about another program that's very exciting that we're working on. And it's all about everything that we do. We're trying to think about how we can better serve the public and drive better voter turnout in the community. So one other project that we're doing, and we're actually working with Google to set up a program that's going to make it a lot easier for people to find out their precinct. So on election day last year, on November 20th, we actually got about 4,000 phone calls. And about a quarter of those phone calls were actually simply people trying to find out where they go vote. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to add a new system that's going to make it easier for people to get that information by going through a web chat that'll be on our website that'll pop up automatically when you go to our website. We're actually buying another domain that's also going to make it easier for people to find us. We're going to eventually migrate over to browardvotes.gov. And when you go to our website, you'll get a little chat window that'll open up. And if you can type in your question, what is it that you need? And then as far as finding out where to go vote, you give us your name and your date of birth, and we'll be able to give you your precinct location and the address and everything, and even like a little link that you can click to get the directions to get to your precinct. You'll also be able to text us. There'll be a text message where you'll get the same thing. And also when you call our office, there'll be a voice prompt as well that will allow you to find out. We also want to streamline updating addresses on election day so that people don't end up going to the wrong precincts. We want to make sure that it's easy and very much streamlined for people to make sure their addresses are up to date. So we want to check their address and then update their address if they have any doubts, if they just moved and they need to get that updated before they go vote, make sure they're at the right precinct. So there's a bunch of things that we're doing that we think if we just make those simple things easier, the type of problems that people run into on election day, that will drive more turnout. Okay, now you brought up Adopt a Precinct. Adopt a Precinct is a program that's actually been around in the state of Florida for a while. My understanding of the history of it is that it actually started off in Broward County, and it existed for a little while, but other counties really picked it up and ran with it. In Orange County, about half of their precincts operate under the Adopt a Precinct program. So let me tell you what that is. With Adopt a Precinct, you allow nonpartisan, nonprofit organizations to take over precincts and run them on election day. And what those organizations are, they get all the support that any other poll workers would get from our office, as far as the training on how to run a polling location. You know, we deliver you all the equipment and supplies and absolutely everything that you could possibly, that we know exactly what you need to run a precinct. The only thing we ask from organizations is to provide us with people. So we need you to provide us with the people. We provide you with everything else. And then at the end of the day, the money that we would have normally spent to run that, to pay the people who would have worked in the precinct, we instead donate that money to the organization. So it becomes a great fundraiser for nonprofit organizations. It also allows us to tap into a whole new pool of people who aren't necessarily looking to go and work at a polling place because they're looking for a paycheck, but there's something that they want to do as part of a community organization that they belong to. They want to work alongside their friends that they're used to working alongside on other public service projects. So you get teams of people that are used to working together, people who know each other, people who already have a sense of who the leaders are in the group, right? And what you end up having is you end up having really well-run polling places with really cohesive teams of people working together. So these polling locations end up being some of the best and most well-run polling locations anywhere in the county. And at the same time, it's a benefit to the community. Those organizations are able to put some branding on their polling locations that they're running, so that people know that that location is being run by, you know, the organization that's running it. And it ends up being just an overall great benefit for us as an elections office, but also for any organizations that decide to participate. So I would like to not do all the talking. I really want to know what's on everybody's minds and see if there's any questions or any concerns that I can address as well.
Yes, if I might, there's a question that was in the Q&A and it's back to the vote by mail and the drop off. Could you explain that one more time, and in particular about requesting the next election ballot? That was the question in the Q&A from Ms. Deborah Hill. And the question reads, will the request for the mail-in ballot cover 1 year, or must it be requested for each voting cycle? Is that January through December or what?
Okay, so we don't know yet exactly what is going to be in the final version of the bill. So, you know, currently under current law, your request will last for 2 election cycles, which is a 4-year period of time. So the early version of the bill actually shortened it down to a calendar year. And the most recent version I saw is actually per election cycle. So, but again, until we get a final bill and until something actually passes, we're not going to know exactly what the new law is. But in anticipation that this idea that you have to re-request every cycle is probably going to be there, that's where we've decided to put basically you're going to put your request is going to be right on the envelope. If you all think about, for those of you who voted by mail, there is a page that you have to sign. There's an attestation page that you sign anyway. So on there, one of the things we're going to add to that page, and we're going to make this very prominent and try to make it stand out some, is requesting your next vote by mail ballot. So that way we have a request for the next cycle. Every general election will get you to request your next cycle of vote by mail ballots. And you'll just have to check a box, or maybe you'll initial, you know, we'll have to work out the details of how it'll work, but we're going to make it so that that request is built in to your vote by mail to request the next one. I hope that answered the question.
There's another question that says, how is your office handling those individuals who either don't use or don't have access to the internet in order to check their information?
So we do have a voice option as well. So there'll be the phone call as well. And there is a text message option as well. So you don't necessarily need to go to the website. You know, if you have a phone that does texting, there'll be a phone number that you can text, and then there'll be a voice option as well. So basically we're actually streamlining not just the website of it, but the voice phone number side as well. And of course, if you come into the office, then you get the full personalized treatment of interacting with a person. But if you call over the phone, we're trying to streamline the process of helping people update their address and get their new voting location. And we just want to make sure that that's able to happen quickly and efficiently, so that there doesn't end up being a big backlog of phone calls, which is one of the problems we've seen in past election cycles, that we have a big backlog of phone calls from people trying to do that on election day.
One of the questions I had is, I read somewhere that you were recently in Tallahassee speaking to the state elections person, and it was attributed to you. I'm not sure if is true. You can tell us. Was it your suggestion that we have the special election for Congressman Hastings' seat, or District 20, to be a November primary and January general? And if so, what was your thinking behind that? Because that really leaves his district, one of which of those people is me, without representation through January. So what was your thinking there, if that is indeed your idea?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, so there was a concern initially that there's a very slim majority right now for the Democrats in Congress. And with our governor being a Republican, and being a fairly partisan Republican at that, we were concerned that he would try to play politics with this special election, and that he would try to leave this seat open for as long as he possibly could. So there was a big effort that, that I played a key role in, as far as I pretty much started the effort of reaching out to the key stakeholders in us holding an election, which would be our Palm Beach County supervisors of elections, as well as the school superintendents, who need to have the buy-in in order for us to have an election on a certain day. So it was through that course of conversation and trying to make sure that we gave everybody the time that they needed to plan this. One thing is, when we have an even number year and we have elections, they have that built into the calendar. Our August elections are always right at the beginning of the school year. And that election, we build that in, it's built into the school's calendar, where they'll give like a teacher work day or something like that, so that there's not students on campus that day. With the special election, we need to come up with some other accommodations. So initially there was this need, or there was this sense that we needed to make sure that we went to November for that purpose of accommodating both school districts, Broward and Palm Beach County, to make sure that they were, that they had enough time. Now, once we did start talking and working with the school districts, everybody was on board with backing up that timeline and getting it back to August. So the current request that we have into the state is for us to have the primary on August 31st and the general election on November 2nd. It was always the goal to have the election as quickly as possible, so that we can get our representation in place. Now, there's a second thing that we wanted to make sure we took care of as well, which was to make sure that we not just get the congressional seat filled, but that we have these all important, we understand how big there's one thing with the federal government and how important that is, obviously, but our state government is even closer to us. And we have a potential to have openings in our very limited representation that we already have as Democrats in the state legislature. And we wanted to make sure that we didn't leave those seats open either. So I wanted to make sure that we actually had buy-in from the legislators who plan to resign to run. I wanted to make sure that I had buy-in from them, that we could go ahead and get the resignations early enough to go ahead and plan their special elections at the same time that we were having the special election for District 20 for the congressional seat. And I'm happy to say that both of the legislators who have announced did agree that they would, absolutely want to hold those, would render their resignations early enough that we could hold those elections at the same time. So I wanted to, happy to be able to engage those folks that way and get all that stuff planned and be able to present that plan to the governor's office of saying, hey, we want to have not just the District 20, we want to get Senate District 33, we want to get House District 94, and these are the dates we want. Oh, and by the way, we have the buy-in from the school district. Both of the supervisors are on the same page. Both of the superintendents are on the same page. And then we have this unified plan that we're presenting so that there's really not an opportunity for anybody to play politics with this and try to keep us from having our seats filled.
Will there be any changes, if I may, to any early voting sites that you can foresee?
So the current plan, the plan that I have is to open every early voting site that falls within that falls inside of District 20. So if the early voting site is inside of District 20, then it'll be open, as well as Senate District 33 and House District 94. So any places that are inside of that district will be open. In addition, I would like to open a few. I'm going to look at basically along sort of major travel corridors within Broward County for people that are traveling back and forth to work. I'm looking for facilities that'll work as drop-off locations. If the state law allows me to do that, current law would allow me to do that, but if the law changes and I'm not allowed to do that, then I won't be able to. But my plan right now is to also have drive-through drop-off locations, which will be a new thing for Broward County, but it's something I talked about when I was running for office, that I would create these drive-through drop-off locations. And as long as state law allows it to happen, I will have those up, at least a couple of those locations up and running as a trial run for this special election.
And what do you see as early voting hours?
We're looking at going from, I think it's 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. for early voting.
Jazz, are there any questions?
For 9 days, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. for 9 days, starting 10 days before the election and ending on the Sunday before the election.
Will that be increased for the general?
No, we're anticipating actually doing the exact same model for both the primary and the general election. For these races, due to the nature of the districts that we're talking about, the primary is probably likely to actually end up having heavier turnout than the general for these races.
Okay. Do you know if your counterpart in Palm Beach County will be doing the same thing as far as early voting sites and times, or it's not been?
No, I can't say for sure. We haven't discussed that yet. Okay. And we probably won't, because she'll make her own, she'll run her shop the way she wants.
Okay.
There are no questions, Madam Prez, in the Q&A. I don't see anything in the chat as a question, but I do have one. When you talked with regard to the early voting sites, and we're used to people being able to drop off their ballots if they so desire at the drop-off box at the early voting sites. And you're going to take into consideration additional other sites outside of those sites that are within the actual district itself, 20 in the House and the Senate seats. Are you also going to consider some additional other sites that might be further west or east because of where people work that might not have the ability to get across town, which will take you anywhere from 20 to 35, 40 minutes. And if you happen to be on a bus, anywhere from an hour to 2 hours to get back and forth just to drop off a ballot during their work time?
Yes, ma'am. And that's actually the exact idea behind the drive-through locations, is that they are, the idea that we're thinking about for those is that it is designed for people who work outside the district. So one place I know I've already secured permission to do this is at the BB&T Center. So there's a big office park location, and a lot of people who work over on that, in that area in Sunrise. So there's a lot of jobs over in that area. But other places, I want to look at places that are high traffic areas that might be sort of right on the edge of the district or even outside the district, but could be maybe really close to the turnpike, close to I-95, close to these major travel corridors where people would be able to easily pull in and drop off their ballots on their way home or on their way to work.
And so could some of these sites be some existing early voting sites, but are just not within the district area?
It could be.
That
Yes.
people are used to?
It could be. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely could be. Mm-hmm.
And so the outreach, I mean, because when we think early voting, we think, certainly not special election, because this is certainly a rarity, thank the Lord. But when we think early voting, we just think our traditional site. So I think the question of outreach would come into play. How will you let people know that they can't go to their regular voting site because it's not within the district, perhaps? Those ones that you decide that are not needed because they're outside of the district or they're not in an area where you've chosen. How do you let people know that?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a good point. It's always something that we have to think about with our communication plan. And, we'll definitely do, a full media campaign to notify people about, the upcoming special election. We'll want people to sign up for that new ballot tracks program that I talked about. And we'll also want people to know where the early voting locations are. So similarly, we set up where we have the early voting locations and we'll tell you the hours and what the locations are. So those type of marketing campaigns will absolutely take place ahead of the special election to let people know what's open and what's available. And ultimately, the budgets aren't unlimited. So, we couldn't, it wouldn't be practical for us to open up 22 locations all across the county for a special election, unfortunately. I wish we could, but there's always budgetary constraints when you're dealing with taxpayer dollars.
And I get that. I just want to find out how we're going to let people know that it's not their usual, because we've spent years, because it's a regular election, basically training people to go to their early voting drop-off site. And so even that, that people always say, well, where can I drop this off, and whether the days and that sort of thing. So I think it'd have to be some type of robust effort to let folk know that we're only using certain ones. And so with the lack of, with the confusion that it's probably going to cause. And we have not, with Pete, there was little to no outreach at all for the community. And so how do you foresee that changing as you move along, and not just for the election piece, but just in general to let people reach out, the outreach to our community in particular?
Yeah, no, so I would say that's already totally changed since I started. Our social media has transformed in the last few months. We started using Instagram. We're exploring other platforms as well, but we started using Instagram, we started using YouTube, but we already had Facebook and Twitter, but it wasn't being used very well, and it's being used a lot better now. So we're using a variety of different platforms to reach out to folks. Definitely, looking even for what we're currently doing now, our high school voter registration drive. There was really no effort under my predecessor to get the word out about that, but we've been doing a lot of work. We actually have bus ads actually rolling around town right now. So we're doing a lot of different things to try to get the word out, even in terms of, say, something like our high school voter registration drive. And we'll certainly do even more for an election to make sure that people know it's time to go vote. So outreach is central to what we do.
Mr. Mark W. Johnson from the Sigmas is asking, 580 Sigma is asking what to give the links for your social media platforms.
Sure, it's at Broward Votes. So we're keeping it real simple. On all those platforms, you can find us at Broward Votes. And I would, since I actually mentioned our high school voter registration drive, that's actually taking place right now. It's an annual event that goes from April 21st until April 30th. So it started yesterday, it ends next Friday. And I would love for, if you all, know most of the people on this call are involved in social media, if you guys could just maybe shoot out a note, let folks know that the high school voter registration drive is happening now. Get all the parents to follow up with their children. What we're basically looking for is anyone who is an American citizen over the age of 16. We'd like them to go ahead and get registered. They will not be added to the voter rolls until their 18th birthday. But if they go ahead and register now, they'll be automatically added to the voter rolls on their 18th birthday, and they won't even have to think about it. So they can get registered now. The high schools are putting out the word. We've got most of the cities around Broward County also pushing out messages to the population to make sure the parents know. A little different this year than most years is that the kids aren't actually at school. So we have to reach them in their homes. We have to get to the parents. So anything you all be willing to do to help us get the word out on that, I'd really appreciate it.
Another question with regard to the changes that may occur with only immediate family members as defined by the new law. And or legal guardian. So for those people, eligible voters who are either residing in assisted living facilities, nursing homes, or some kind of group setting that have no immediate family members or legal guardians to advocate and or drop off for them, how will their votes, if they did a vote by mail or a drop off or wanted a drop off, how will they be outreached to, and what will happen in those settings? Since
yeah, no,
many people used to go and help the nursing homes and the ALFs and what have you, reach out to them to pick up those ballots and drop those back off to the SOE office. So will the SOE's office be reaching out to those types of facilities with some kind of special arrangements for them?
Ms. Shirley, you could count on it. You could count on it. You know, we will do, you know, as much outreach as we possibly can. You know, it's really terrible. You bring up a lot of great points there about just how terrible this new law could potentially be in terms of making it difficult for folks to participate. I think probably one of the primary messages that I would like to even start pushing out right now is to put it in the mail and put it in the mail early. Now, it's understandable that people don't. You know, one thing is that we do have, you know, some negative messages or negative things we've heard about the Postal Service at the national level. But what I would remind people is that if you look at, you know, who your letter carrier is in your neighborhood, look at who the folks who are running our Postal Service locally, and they are people that we can trust. That's one point that I like to make. You know, I also understand that people are concerned about this idea that the ballot has to reach us by 7 p.m. on election night. Unlike some states that actually have a postmark deadline, in Florida, we don't have the postmark deadline. You have to get it back to us by 7 p.m. So that makes people uncomfortable. How do I know it's going to get there by 7 p.m. on election night? And my answer to that is put it in the mail now. You know, you get it 45, you know, about 40 or so days before an election, you have that ballot, go ahead and vote and put it right back in the mail. Don't wait. But if we can start getting more people to put that ballot in the mailbox and let it get back to us that way, that would be tremendously beneficial to everybody.
Thank you. And then there's another question in the Q&A from Karen, and she is asking, will you be notifying the churches regarding their efforts or your efforts to alert people about registering to vote? Many people are not on social media, and she doesn't know if your strategies are addressing this issue of concern.
Absolutely. So as far as going through, you know, I did actually, as far as our high school voter registration drive, I did take the time to go and talk to a particular group of pastors, and I spoke with a good group of about 20 pastors from across Broward County, and put the information out through them. So I would like to sort of increase that effort and find, because I know there's other groups out there and there are more groups. So I'm going to continuously work to try to build that network and find, you know, more groups of pastors that I can make sure we're have a tight communication with, and that we're putting information out to them to put out to their congregation. So that's an excellent point. And you know, and I'll make sure that we're continuing to build that, you know, build that network to make sure that we have that the most robust network possible of churches that we're communicating with.
And let me just one more question before we go to the representative, Leader DeBose. This year, I understand, is a purging year for voters or those, should I say inactive voters that you all have?
Well,
Can
I'll
you,
tell you, we're not purging in Broward County. I can tell you that, but I get what I know, I understand what you're getting at. I'll let you, yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to
I
make
didn't mean to
sure
cut you
if
off.
we are purging, since there's, I know other places are, and the rules change with the supervisor of elections, so you could share with us how we're going to do that, make sure we're not, in particular with our elections coming up, I wanted to make sure that those folk are, if they were going to be purged, what is your, what's your plan for that? And to
Mhm.
make sure that, how are you notifying those people that you plan to remove from the voter rolls or move to inactive as your other person, from inactive to ineligible, as your predecessor liked to say. So you're saying that you're not going to be purging folk this year.
No, we're definitely not. And I'll say, there's what you're referring to is our list maintenance process, which takes place. It's by state law does have guidelines that defines how we go through this process. And it happens in every odd number year. And the point of list maintenance is to simply make sure that any people who have been inactive are, their status is updated. So if they haven't voted in the past 2 election cycles, then they become an inactive voter. And then if they don't vote for 2 more election cycles, then they become ineligible and they have to register again. When you are inactive, if you haven't voted in 2 election cycles, so if it's been 4 years since the last time you voted, then you become inactive. And you can still show up to your polling place on election day and you will be reactivated. Now, after 8 years have passed and you've gone through 4 election cycles, then you actually have to register again. So this is something that is by state law, and I don't have much control over it, but here's what we can do. We can be very careful about how we go through this process, because you can go through this process and you can, make mistakes and remove people who shouldn't be removed. And that's what happens. People do this in a careless way. And I'll tell you what, and a lot of this I think does have to do with leadership and with the sort of tone that you set in an organization. So people can feel, what it is that the boss is expecting. And I know that my team, which I have a great team, had a great team. They were a great team before I got there. And these folks care about the community, and they are not out to needlessly remove people from the voter rolls. And we get regular updates about people who have passed away, people who have been ruled mentally incapacitated by a court, or people who have been convicted of an offense that causes them to lose their right to vote. So we get those on a regular basis and we update the rolls based on that. We do the required notifications to make sure that people are aware, to make sure that we're not making a mistake. And we do this in a very meticulous fashion to make sure that we don't make mistakes, that we don't get the wrong person because they have a similar name, and that we're not picking up people that we shouldn't be picking up. And I think that's the best, that you can really ask for, because we have to comply with the state law, but we take great care and handle this in the most meticulous fashion to make sure that we're not disenfranchising anybody.
Thank you, and stay with us if you will, Mr. Scott. I've invited Leader DuBose here, and let me just say, Leader DuBose has been working. First of all, he's born and raised NAACP. He is a former youth council, bless your jazz, president. He is a life member of the NAACP, and every time I call him, which is a lot, he always answers. And this year, I must say that I did not have I didn't have to call him. He was calling me with all the issues that have been going on, these crazy bills. So that is why he is on again and why he continues to be, because we need to make sure we know what's going on in Tallahassee. And so I was speaking to him and we talked about these crazy bills that are going to come up, that is up now, that we need to really discuss. Changes, and I'm saying amendments to voter suppression bills. And so Leader DuBose did what he always does, is call and say, this is where we are now. And clearly this is going to affect Broward County as we move along. So our own Representative Bobby DuBose, who is always here to hear our concerns and find out, to make sure that we know what's going on and help develop an action plan as we move forward. So with that, I'd like to invite our own Leader DeBose to the floor. So let's talk about voter suppression amendments that are happening as we speak. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Madam President. And I will say, it's two ways. I answer when you call, and you answer when I call. And as we are up here working and fighting these voter suppression bills, and on a broader stage, Jim Crow 2.0, because this is just a piece of what's going on. And it's more of a national narrative that's coming down. And so as we prepare, as we push back, as we try and negotiate this stuff, the NAACP is one of our allied partners. And I'll get in a little bit more of that. And just kind of picking up where SOE Joe Scott was talking, as it stands now, he's correct. This bill started out one way. Actually, our bill was moving pretty much kind of the same time as the Georgia's bill, and they were both pretty much the same, very egregious bills. And then when Georgia's bill became law, and you saw the pushback not only from the lawmakers, but from corporate America and everyone engaged, and some of that trickled down this way. And this bill has gone, they remove things, they add things. So, I'm gonna kind of give you what's going on in both chambers. So the drop boxes are a great place to start. Kind of now as it stands over in the Senate, that bill language, there's no ID required at that drop box. So it's in a little better posture. Now over on the House side, we have the ID required plus the declaration form or the attestation form. And so, and I'll try and get a little technical, so I'm glad I got some backup here with Brother Joe. So if you, and I think, let me just kind of jump in. I think we were talking about who is a designee. As we have it right now, it's those immediate family members as defined. It's the spouse, the parents, the child, siblings, and what they think they added, and grandparents. So that's where that is. So when it comes to those ballots, there's no limit there. And when you bring in that ballot, and so if you bring in a ballot for anybody outside of your family, then that's where you're going to need that declaration form. And that's kind of right now capped at 2. And then if you show up with no ID, and then the way they're writing it, that's when you got to fill out that attestation form. The other thing about these drop boxes, and you're kind of talking about it, the way the House bill has, these drop boxes must be manned during early voting hours, and other times they must also be manned. So right now, when it comes to the drop boxes, those are the differences where the Senate bill sits and where the House bill fits. As it relates to the vote by mail, both bills are lining up the same, and they went from the 2 general election requests, and it's each cycle you'll need, and SOE Scott had mentioned, and one of the concerns that we have here is the cost and what's going to need it to educate folks that change is there. But when you opened up, you talked about that, so I'm really happy to see that you're on top of that. There's also similar language when it comes to signature match that's been back and forth, and this as it pertains for your vote by mail ballots. And so at one point they were at 4 years, and now both bills say 8 years of signatures to go back and do that comparison. Something else that both bills kind of line up with is the solicitation zones. And we're going from 100 feet out to 150 feet out. And then here's where I'm not sure how this is going to work, but the 150 feet is if there's a drop box. So I guess SOE Scott, that might be something when you're putting these drop boxes out. So it's not 150 feet from, you know, the voting location. So if we're 150 feet from the door, but the drop box is another 75 or 50 or so, that doesn't count. It's going to be 150 from that drop box, which may push things further back. So I think that's something that we really need to be mindful about. The other thing that I found kind of interesting is just something that they put in there, and it's in both bills as relates to poll watchers, but they were very specific about the ID badges and making sure they be 3 inches by 5 inches. I'm not sure where they're going with that, but that's something that we're looking at. We're trying to see what the intent is behind that. The other piece, and this came in on the House side, is some language that they put in about the vacancies and filling the vacancies, and we're looking at that. And the bill sponsor wasn't very clear as relates to that. Now, this doesn't relate to the congressional seat, because how that's handled is codified in the U.S. Constitution. But what's very interesting is they took out language. It's very specific, because right now, just use Broward as example, when our county commissioners resign, then the governor can come in and he can make an appointment to the next general election. That's nothing new to us, but they are, you know, charter officers, you know, the state. But what's interesting is that they pull out language as relates to the municipal office. And so, and that generally says that office, when an expired term, is in a manner provided by the respective charter. So they've taken that out, and we're trying to get clarification. It appears that the governor, they're trying to make a grab, whereas he would be able to do the same thing on the city level that he does on the county level. So right now, if a individual, and I was a prime example of that back in 2014, when I resigned from the city commission to run for the state house, what governed that process was the city of Fort Lauderdale's charter, which spoke to how we would handle that. But the way the bill is now, and it's in the House bill, it removes that. So it appears that they're trying to give the governor the same power on the city level that it has on the county level, or charter officers, not just county, but SOE, sheriff, school board, and so forth. So that is something that we're trying to get clarification on. We're looking at it. We're working with our allied partners, including the NAACP, kind of as it sits. Their interpretation is similar to mine, that it appears that they're trying to put it in that posture. Now, as it relates to the state offices, we are all interpreting as such that those still have to be a special election. And that's kind of a side by side of where we're at with the election bill or the voter suppression. You know, it's very interesting that the governor and they were all touting that this was the gold standard. This is the best election that we had. And then they turn around and come with these bills. And, you know, I think it's an insult to not only to the Secretary of State, but to the 67 supervisor of elections who did a gold standard. And now they're coming back to say, well, we got some problems. And so this is just a part of the narrative. This is a grab. This is, you know, and maybe we'll get into a little bit, but, you know, we had a lot of discussion around, HB1, the anti-protester bill. And so we know we needed that to help us get the right to vote. And so now, they've changed that. And then now we're coming out the elections. The other thing, I think I have one question for Supervisor Election Scott. In when we're talking about the vote by mail and the request, and I think that's an excellent idea that you can check. So when you check it, is it just for, you said for each election, or is it a general cycle? Because sometimes municipalities have elections within that time frame, or other elections come up. Again, I think it's a great idea, but I too had a question, because it's good that we're having this discussion. So when we're raising these issues as it travels through this process, I want to be able to speak to that intent.
Yeah, so I'll tell you the way we look at it now, under current law, it says 2 election cycles. So any municipal elections that might have the March elections that may happen during that time, we will automatically send out the vote by mail ballots to those folks if it's inside that window. And we actually had a big uptick in participation in the March municipals that we just had. And I believe that a big part of that was due to the fact that so many people requested vote by mail ballots for COVID.
Awesome.
And which is actually a benefit for us that we need to keep in mind that we'll have in the 22 cycle, is that a lot of folks in our community will continue to get those vote by mail ballots through the 22 cycle as well. So that should help us bring up our turnout. But that is the way we look at it. We do include those municipal elections because we consider the cycle to end at the next November general election in the even number year. So that's where the cycle ends.
Okay. Madam President, that's what I have on our end as a update, but this thing is ever changing. And, as soon as it changes, I'll shoot you an email with our analysis side by side, and we will continue to discuss this. I think it's very important. And, I'm always proud of our Fort Lauderdale Broward chapter, NAACP, because you all set the standard and being engagement. And I was telling Madam President that, I've been getting calls to do updates throughout the state, but this is what it's about. This is really important that we're all aware and we're all engaged in this process. Just don't be fooled. This is just one part of this overall Jim Crow 2.0 that these folks are following the Trump narrative, and they are using their power. And that's why folks got to understand these are the consequences of not voting.
Thank you.
Madam President, I have one question of Representative DuBose and Supervisor of Elections Scott. I was on another Zoom just the other evening with former Supreme Court Peggy Quint, and she was going over some of the Senate Bill 90. I don't know what the House bill side of that is, with many of the voter suppression strategies in it. But is the food and water distributions at polling sites limited to only SOE staff and volunteers?
Thank you, Jazz. And I forgot that part too. That prohibition on giving water, food, in lines, that's no longer in either version of the bill.
Thank you.
Well, and let me just say right now. Right now.
Yeah,
How about portable seating?
It's a fluid situation, and it's changing. It seems to be changing on a daily basis this past week.
Rodney, you had a question?
Yeah, how about portable seating for those lines? Is that still allowed? Like a portable chair for the?
Yeah, that's not in either the bill right now. But again, we have tomorrow, and then we have next week. So I'll keep you updated. So right now, we don't have to worry about those things.
And I know one of the questions, Mr. Scott, you seem to have, the question was, have you met with your local postal folk? Because you seem to have a whole lot more confidence in the post office than the people at the post office. And there are several on this phone that have been here we're with the Postal Service for decades, quite frankly. We have seen some tricks going down with the post office. And there were, kind of stopgaps put in place locally, who the past president made sure that those things were that they were ended, or they didn't work like they didn't work for us like they were supposed to be, meaning you could just drop your ballot off and then it'd be delivered properly without getting hung up in Miami-Dade or going to Palm Beach or Atlanta as has happened in the past. So the question was, have you met with, I guess, the Postmaster General lately, and where your confidence comes from in the post office? The Postal Service, I'm sorry.
No, I understand. Yeah, so that is, so we did, because of COVID, we actually had a Zoom call with some of the senior leaders locally here to discuss a few of the issues and find ways that we could work together better and make sure that we just had a open dialogue and open communication. Additionally, I had a chance to go out to a couple of the letter carrier union meetings during the time that I was running. So I had a chance to interact with some of those folks that were actually at the level of, actually collecting the ballots, and the folks that'll be bringing them in and making sure they get in. But then having that opportunity to, but as I mentioned, we're going to continue to build the relationship and make it stronger. But I think it's really important that, especially considering the changes that may be coming for the drop boxes, we have to build that confidence. I think that this past election, I know some of the stuff that you talked about was things that happened in previous cycles, but this past election, the performance was, I didn't hear any complaints about the performance. And from what we saw on our end, it was a fraction of what we expected. The number of ballots that came in after the election was very small. And the postmark dates on those ballots were like day of, or it was either Monday or Tuesday. Anything that was put in the mail prior to that, it all made it into us, especially if it was local. And even locally, we had ballots that were put in the mail on Monday that made it to us. So you could see that the effort was there. And that's where my confidence is coming from. Just the fact that we saw such a tremendous improvement in 2020, that we did see ballots that were mailed on Monday reach us on Tuesday. And that's where it's coming from. So it's coming from the fact that I know they put in the effort. I know that I've had a chance to talk to a lot of these folks, and they came across as being good people who were really committed to doing the right thing.
Mr. Scott, we will give you a call offline to tell you how that stuff happened. There was a lot of work from a lot of people, particularly Postal Service workers, to make sure that happened, but it was not easy for them, and they can share with you what really happened in order to make that effort happen. It was something that we will certainly contact you to share with you offline as you move forward, because that is a very critical point that goes on. And I know from Supervisor of Elections Office, they certainly push that, if you could not, if it's 14 days out, don't drop it in the mail, use one of the drop boxes or something along those, because we don't know where it may end up with. So there's it was a Herculean effort put in to make sure that those folk did something different than mailing it out, because there's a whole effort that goes on that doesn't really work well for us.
Understood. So yeah, I'd love to discuss that with you. Absolutely.
Jasmine, Judge, some other questions?
There was another question in the Q&A with regard to the PIP insurance. If Representative DuBose has any information to share.
About voter registration and voter suppression. We're not going to do that today. She could contact.
Okay, I will type that in for the person that asked that question.
And Jasmine, if you could just let them know they could just reach out to my office, and
I will put that information in there for her.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Next question. I think there's one in here from Patty Lynn.
Yes,
Go ahead and read that one, please, ma'am.
yes, Patty Lynn had asked, at one point in time, there used to be a special dedicated team of outreach workers specific to the senior population, such as the nursing homes, ALFs, what have you, as well as other stakeholders in the community, like community centers that dealt specifically with that senior population, to assure that they had every opportunity and worked with them every election such that all the seniors in those type of facilities could vote. And that's like with the AARP, with the Northwest Federated Women's Club, with the Senior Focus Group, with the Area Agency on Aging. Is that team effort, collaboration, and the dedicated staff that were involved in the SE going to be reactivated?
So we do have a very active outreach operation is involved. I can't say that all of the same people are not involved because some of those people aren't with the organization anymore, but we did actually add one new staff member who is specifically focused particularly on voters that have accessibility issues and also people that are senior voters as well. So we are not only committed to that, but we're also taking on new initiatives to focus on people that are exiting our correctional system as well. With the passing of Amendment 4 a couple years back, there's actually a large number of people that are leaving the criminal justice system that are regaining their civil rights. And we want to make sure that we basically want to treat them the same way we've been treating people for the longest who go through the immigration system. When they become naturalized and they become naturalized citizens, we always go out there and we get those people registered to vote. We want to treat the people exiting the criminal justice system the same way. So part of our outreach, a new thing that we've started with our outreach program, is to start working directly with the corrections department to make sure that we're catching those folks, but also going back and revitalizing some of those things. The high school voter registration efforts that we're doing is one thing that we're doing, but also on the side of the senior communities and those types of things. We actually just recently, just last month, we had a big event out at Winmore where we went out there and we worked with Commissioner Mickey Belvedere, and we set up an event to go out there and register people to vote in Winmore. So yeah, the outreach is back. It's back in full effect. And we are looking for projects. We're looking for things to do, looking for ways to engage the public here in Broward County.
Thank you. And then one last question from Deborah Hill. Can the track by mail be included in the voting packet with a bold telephone number for individuals to call that do not have computers? This might increase confidence in mailing ballots.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that's something we'll have to set up. You're right. That is not something that's currently included. I'll have to check and see that new program that I talked about, ballot tracks. There is sort of a requirement to go to our website to sign up for that. I'm going to have to see if there is a way for people to sign up over the phone. And we're going to try to get something out to do that. I think is that what the question was? Did I address it?
Well, actually, they were asking, could that be a part of the voting packet that you send out to folks whenever you're going to start? For example, when folks are just getting their registrations done, requesting their ballots, if they're requesting their ballots via the telephone or whatever packets you may be sending out to individuals, their new cards, any kind of information that you're sending out to individuals that happen to not have computers, but they could see that bold information as to where they can get back in contact with you via phone. Oh,
sure, absolutely. So I'll tell you, all the materials that I've seen always have our phone number prominently displayed on those materials. So I'll double check and make sure, but I believe everything we send out has our phone number prominently displayed, and that will continue. We're not going to change that.
Judge Holmes.
Madam President, there was a question and I didn't want us to forget it. It's from Beverly Williams, the Vice Mayor, Lauderdale Lakes. It's a twofold question. She says, at one time, the SOE had a department who actually went to the nursing homes and they helped people there to vote by mail.
Yes.
That's the first part of her question. Will that continue?
That will, absolutely. That program is not going anywhere.
Right. Her second question is, what are the plans for allowing others to assist with registration? At one time, you had to have a certified number. I don't know what that means, but
She might be referring to the third-party voter registration organizations.
yes, I think that may be it. But she can type me, Beverly, type me real quick if that's not what you meant. But go on.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's what she meant.
Yeah. So, we definitely want to partner with those third-party voter registration organizations. That was something that, appears to have been a past voter suppression idea that came out of Tallahassee to basically, make it administratively difficult for people to help other people get registered to vote. Seems totally unnecessary, but we want to partner with third-party voter registration organizations and make them feel comfortable and at ease with what they need to do. One thing I actually did before I was even running with my local fraternity chapter with Alpha Phi Alpha, we did set up, they actually had a third-party voter registration set up, but I helped them get the information updated and helped train all the people that went out and did some of our voter registration efforts that we did for 2020 last year. And, as long as everybody understands what the rules are, there's really no risk to that. But I would love to take a greater role if folks want to cooperate with my office. We'll work with you and make sure that everybody feels comfortable with what they need to do.
Let me ask this, it may be a question for Leader DeBose. For those, we talked about assisted living facilities and that sort of thing. If in the current bill as it sits today, if you have, would the, say it's too late to mail, could the staff there then, if they have vote by mail ballots, could they then deliver to the supervisor of elections office, or would that be illegal? I mean, if they have no one else to drop off the ballot, what would happen in a case like that?
So as it stands, I would say yes in a general sense, because you can do up to 2 outside of your family, but you have to have them sign that declaration page. So as the bill stands, I think it's 2, and I think that might be both bills, but there is a limited effort allowance in up to 2 outside of your immediate family.
So how does it say, how do I verify that it's my grandmother's ballot when we got the,
Well, you don't have to.
names? You know what I mean? So if they say that it's my immediate family, and if they, she might be, everybody got those grandmas that ain't necessarily grandma, but it's grandma.
Right.
It's your sort of thing. So is there any recourse, are there any ramifications for trying to help the people that you see as family, but perhaps with blood you're not family? You know what I mean?
Right.
No, that's exactly what's being criminalized here. They're criminalizing non-traditional families. They know it'll impact our communities more than other communities. And that's exactly what they're doing. But I'll let Leader DeBose answer that.
Well, no, and I mean, these are some of the things that, as this bill is moving, that the issues that we're raising and we're pushing back. And this is part of the reason why, we keep getting these new forms of variations of this bill for, the very reason they come with this blanket approach or this approach, and we expose to them because culturally, as you laid out, we identify family a lot differently, and that's why they expanded and added to immediate family, grandparents and things of that nature, because they understand a lot of us, we bring our elders in to live with us. So there's nothing to criminalize. It's just very limited because if you're in the same household, the same address, and you're saying that's your grandmother's form, you're bringing your grandma's, and your ID and their address match the way the bill sponsor answered it, it would be accepted as the immediate family.
but I do know a lot of churches that have a senior membership that, will have a session at their church, to fill out the ballots to make sure that they, have an opportunity to complete it based on candidates that they know. And then they would be delivered to the SOE. So if as the bill sits today, that would be against the rules as well.
Well, it depends on who's delivering it for them. And this is a question that we raised, and maybe SOE Scott can kind of come in, because we're saying, okay, you're putting this restrictions. If it's immediate family, I could just bring it and drop it off and show my ID. If it's someone outside of my family, I got to get a declaration page, and that voter has to sign that. And then I'm bringing it in, and I'm limited to 2. So some of our questions are, well, how is the SOE going to capture that? And, what's going to stop someone from going from one location to the other and doing more than 2? So we're kind of told, after the fact, they'll scan all these forms in and so forth. And then I guess they'll go look at it that way. To be honest, many times the bill sponsors didn't have good answers. This is something that they're just kind of, they know what their intent is, and it is to suppress the vote, but the way they're doing it, they're crafting it, has a lot of holes in it. So I'm not exactly sure how they would even track that. How would they, keep track of who's turning in what? And if they go from, one drop box location to the other. And these are some of the issues and the concerns that we're pushing back on.
Right.
So, Representative DeBose, there are a lot of immediate family members that don't carry the same last surname.
Well, that's why they say the address. That's the first spot. If you have all these folks living with your same address, and you have when I go to drop it off, and my address, my ID and my address match what I'm turning, they're just taking it, okay, that's immediate family. So, that part right there, I guess, would catch if you got a household full of people and they may not be blood, but, like we said, grandma and stuff like that. So the way the bill sponsor responded is if those addresses match up, then the intent is to take it as immediate family.
Okay, and I guess if the address doesn't match up, but I'm saying it's my, my immediate family member, what is the supervisor of election, based on how the bill sits today, how are they instructed to handle that?
Well, and those are the questions we have, but then they would either take it on merit, or they would have them in the form of outside of immediate family, and then they would have to have that declaration page. And so those are some of the questions we have. If you need a declaration page, then, we're hearing even in the chat, not everyone has, maybe access to a computer. A lot of times, in our community, our folks don't have access to printers. I mean, I have family members, cousins, call, hey, can you print this? And they come by and they pick up. So we're requiring this form. This is just simple extra layers to suppress the vote, to make it more difficult. I mean, that's the long short of it. And when we press on this and we ask these questions, there are no good answers. And then the next time the bill moves, we get this whole new version and something else is dropped. But those are some of the concerns. And then when we're putting this here, and then what then does that mean for our 67 supervisors of elections offices? Are they going to interpret it the same way? Because it's kind of open. As you can see, I exposed some of the problems with the way this current legislation is written.
And one thing that I see as a big problem with it is that I believe that when you come to places like here in Broward County, Miami-Dade, Palm Beach, there's going to be this strict enforcement of these rules. Whereas in some of these rural counties, they're not going to care that the laws change. They're going to keep doing things the way they always did. And there's just not going to be any enforcement. We know that that's what tends to happen when we see law changes. We'll probably end up seeing it with HB1 that just passed, that it depends on who's protesting, right? with HB1, how that gets enforced will depend on who's protesting. And it'll be the same thing with this voting bill, is that how strictly they enforce the rules at the drop boxes will depend. We'll have all kinds of people down here in Broward County monitoring our drop boxes, watching everything we do, second guessing and questioning everything we do. But when you go to some of these other counties, you won't see any of that.
And just to kind of expand on that, it is about suppressing the vote, because as we're sitting here thinking about this and we're around drop boxes and so forth, but there's nothing that's stopping an individual from going and collecting absentee ballots for their neighbors and so forth and taking them and dropping them in the mailbox.
There was a question for both of you, if either of you have any statistics on you, with regard to the number of individuals that have had their rights restored. And I know you said, Mr. Scott, that information daily comes into you all to update your records and what have you. Does anyone have any statistics yet on how many that might be, or what the statistics may be, so that we know exactly what we're dealing with in terms of those persons being able to get registered and or exercise their right to vote once registered?
So I'll tell you, the data that comes to us on almost a daily basis is only about taking people off, people who have lost their rights. We don't get the reverse of, people who've had their rights restored. It would be great if we did, but obviously that's not the interest. But no, I can't say that I, have those statistics. This is something that, has proven to be a very difficult challenge to make sure that, that we get people the right information, that they know what their fines and fees are, if they still owe any fines and fees. But if people come to us and they want to register to vote, we will accept their voter registration form and they will be added to the voter rolls. So it's really, the onus is on the individual to know what their status is before they register. My office is not going to stop anybody from registering to vote.
Engineer Brooks, our branch secretary, had a question. Engineer. Go ahead, Jazz.
Yeah. There was another question from.
Hold on, she's back. She's unmuted. Go ahead, Angie.
Yes, my question was, is there 2 total or 2 a day that you can drop off?
Total.
No, well, let's just be clear. Right now, there is no limit on how many, under current law, you can drop off as many ballots as you want. Now we are hoping, and I think there's still a glimmer of hope, or Representative DuBose could probably tell better than I can. There's a glimmer of hope that this crazy nonsense in Tallahassee at least gets pushed to next session maybe, or stopped altogether. I might be dead wrong about that. I see the look on your face there. Maybe not, but I'll just, so people know, under current law, you can drop off as many ballots as you want. And as far as what the new law is going to say, we have to see what the final version of the bill is before we can really speak to that. It's going to be difficult. I mean, to sit there and say, like he said, there's not going to be any keeping track of how many ballots every individual person has dropped off.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as the bill is written, we're looking at 2. Again, it could change, and Brother Scott, I'm gonna just kind of follow, Madam President, your optimism as it relates to the path of this bill is similar to how you feel about the post office. So maybe we can have a talk offline as well on that one.
The reason I asked, because I work with a senior agency. I have a blind woman that, they call me to pick up their registrations religiously. I don't have to call them. They call me about their voting. They want to vote. These are seniors. So it really would be disenfranchising them. In the wheelchair, they catch the transit to come to the senior place. So they look forward to voting, but they always looking for information, people to help them to drop them off. So that would really hinder and hurt them. Like I said, I even have a blind lady that she votes. Be like, it's ready, come pick it up. So,
And
that's all of
and that's the objective, what you said, disenfranchised. So that would be their objective. But again, I will say, you know, as much as they put this stuff in there, if an individual were to the same practice and just took all those ballots and put them in the mail in a timely manner, I don't know if there's a way but SOE Scott can determine how it arrived.
No,
So it's not about making sense, as my colleague Representative Patricia Williams from down from Broward, and I refer to her as Pompano Pat, would say, common sense ain't coming up here in Tallahassee.
So, Mr. Scott, there was a question with regard to drop-off box sites, especially doing early voting, and we talked about that earlier in your discussion. The SOE offices, both at the Lauderhill office and the downtown administrative building, the governmental center, will those two places still be offered as drop-off box sites?
yeah, so that's one of the big casualties of this new legislation that's coming through, is that we had these 24/7 drop boxes that we would set up as soon as we mail out our ballots. So those were the only two in the county that were 24/7 basically throughout the whole election season. And that would be expressly illegal under the current versions of the bills that are in the legislature. So what we would have to do is, it would have to be, we would have to have it manned, and we would have hours set up, the hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And, so it is something that would have to be revisited, and it would only be during the early voting period as well. So there's a lot of changes to how that part of it would work. It's really unfortunate. Overall, we got to try to stop this thing, because it's really bad, and it's going to cause a lot of voter suppression in Broward County.
So the other thing I would say, in the House version, House Bill 7041, to that point, there is some language that during the hours, secure drop boxes may be accessible if secured from tampering and monitored by video surveillance. And so there's some language in there that would allow, and then that footage would have to be available for up to 24 hours, after it's taken, if someone comes in and questions and asks. So the House version, it may allow some flexibility there, but again, this thing keeps changing. But just to that point, there's some language in the House side that, but then it'll create you having the proper video surveillance and so forth.
Now, one possibility that we've talked about under the current versions of the most recent version we saw was that we could have satellite offices. And if we were to establish satellite offices in, say, within the library system, for example, then we would have more locations that people could go and drop off, and possibly even drop off earlier and drop off on the day of and day before. So there's some other options, and we'll certainly, once the final bill comes out, we're gonna dissect it and figure out what we can't do. And then once we know what we can't do, we'll start trying to figure out what it is that we can do. And we'll start looking for new ways to recover that capacity that we lose.
Yeah.
So it seems then that with many of the restrictions and many of these bills trying to suppress as much, your office, Mr. Scott, quite frankly, is going to have to try to be as more creative and innovative in the ways to assure that folks have their rights and get to cast their votes as conveniently as possible for them without frustration, that their experience is a good one. So it would seem that all of these strategies that you might want to put into play is going to cost a lot of money, or may cost some money. So are you confident that that you're going to have the budget to be as creative and innovative as you need to be?
Actually, I am. You know, from the conversations I've had with the county commissioners, everybody seems very supportive. So it has been a very supportive county commission, and I know that they are on the side. And hopefully, I don't get any pushback on this one. But what I've seen, very optimistic with our county commissioners that they are, you know, on the side of justice and that they want our people to be able to vote, and they just want to know, you know, what do you need to make this happen. So that's where it stands right now, and I believe that that's where it'll be. As far as some things, when I talk about doing the satellite offices, a lot of what we'll do is we'll use the staff that we currently have. We've created, you know, one thing that has been a benefit from COVID is that we've all learned to work remotely a little bit better than we did before. Like all of us that are on this Zoom call right now, we've gotten a lot better with using technology just collectively as a society. And so everybody, you know, especially in my office, now has a laptop where they didn't before. So we can use our current staff. Our phone system is connected to it's an internet phone system that basically people are able to take their calls from home now for people that would have to be out for COVID restrictions. In some cases, the office phone would dial right in their living room. You know, so if they were sitting in a public library somewhere, they could still answer our office phone from there. So the costs are really not as great as you may think. We can really spread our team out across the county without spending a lot of money. So it's actually something that's very feasible for us to do.
Okay, thank you very much. And one last question I have, it's not a question, it's more of a comment too. And I heard you discuss the innovative project that was rolled out in other areas where you're using nonprofit organizations to become your staffing at voting sites and run those precincts. I would hope that you recognize the talents that you have, especially in the African American Research Library and Cultural Center. That team is phenomenal across the entire county. I've never had a better experience. That team knows how to process. The wait times there have never, even in the last general elections, phenomenal team you got there. I hope they stay in play and that no other organization think they can come in and replace them, because they are a great team.
I appreciate that. And I'm actually really glad you brought up that point for a couple of reasons. One is to clarify that this Adopt a Precinct program is specifically for election day. It's not for the early voting teams for the most part. And I think we have phenomenal early voting teams at all of our locations. That's not, there's no changes there. Now, as far as election day, there's always a big effort. I'm sure there are people on this call right now who have been longtime poll workers on election day and have been doing this for years and even decades. And I can promise you, we are going to need you for the foreseeable future. Every election, there's a huge effort to go out and recruit poll workers. We're always looking for new people to come in and help us. And it depends on where the unemployment rate is. As the unemployment rate drops, it gets really difficult for us to find people to work our polling locations. And right now, the economy is starting to really take off. So, you know, we need to come up with creative ways to find poll workers for election day. Everybody who has been a poll worker and wants to continue to be a poll worker, I promise you there will be a place for you. We're going to need you and a whole lot more people to participate.
One last question very quickly, Percy Johnson.
So, good evening, everybody. For the supervisor of elections, I wanted to ask about what are the hours and how many days do we have to vote? Again, did you say 7 days or 14 days?
It's 9 days. It'll start on Saturday, 10 days before the election, and it'll end on the Sunday, 2 days before the election. Okay, so it'll be those 9 days, including 2 weekends. And we're looking at for the hours to be 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And if I'm not mistaken, I'll take that. So the weekend hours are going to be a little different than the weekday hours. But I know the hours that we kind of initially set was 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And we'll eventually, by the time we actually have start marketing this election, we'll have all the hours put in place. Right now, it's all just preliminary planning. We don't even have an order from the governor to hold a special election yet. And
that's just rules for the special election that's coming up, correct? That's not
correct.
Standard
correct.
that's going on.
Yeah.
And once that is finalized, it will be posted on your website boldly where
It'll
everyone will
be-
know.
Oh man, we're going to market this thing everywhere. We're going to make sure everybody knows we're having a special election. We're going to make sure everybody knows to sign up for ballot tracks. We're going to make sure everybody knows where the early voting locations are. We're going to use every platform that we can get our hands on to get the message out to folks.
And then there was one last question from Mark Johnson. Will the Adopt a Precinct program be for primary and general election day or just the general election day?
Yes, it'll be for it'll be used for any election day that we have, whether it's, even our municipal elections that we have, it could potentially be used there too, but it will be an election day event as opposed to early voting.
And one last thing from me, Mr. Scott, what I'd like for your office to do is to make sure that when you agree to, to work with these different facilities, that you may be adding some new ones, that there has to be something where they are courteous to the voters. We had a number of incidents, and fortunately, we did have a direct line to the supervisor of elections office and to the county attorney where they were not letting people use the restroom. And these, we're talking facilities such as, our libraries, art serve happened, will the manager happen in public facilities. And so if you're going to have someone in their private business who is not going to allow folk to do something as simple as using the restroom, then that's perhaps not the place we ought to be having public elections at. And that would apply to both those folk who are outside in the hot sun and the rain and who are working campaigns, and also for those individuals who are voting, because that happened in several locations. And thank goodness that I was able to hear about it, the majority of them, quickly, and then call Miss Mary Hall or call Bertha Henry. But it's something that if you were forward thinking, we could avoid having people treated in that manner.
Yes, ma'am. And I know you have my cell phone number, so that number is not going to change. Yeah, so I will. One thing is I'll circle back with you. I'll check in with Mary Hall as well. I know she probably is already aware of the specific facilities that you're referring to, and I'll follow up with them on that and make sure that they're aware of that, and to make sure that we are checking in with those folks and making sure those problems are solved for the next election.
Thank you. Leader DeBose, closing remarks, sir.
Just real quick, Madam President, if I could just ask SOB Scott, you had mentioned that you're doing a high school voter registration drive right now through the end of the month, and you had on your social media platforms. Is there any social media graphics that we can, snag and just share on our platforms? I think that'll help us out. Is there?
Yep, we do. So I think probably the best thing is if you actually go to @Broward Votes, and I would urge you all, whether it be, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, to reshare some of the posts that we've already put out. Just go on there and share what we put your own comment on there, and urge people to participate. And that'd be the best way to find it. Most of the posts that we've put out probably over the past week or so have been in reference to high school voter registration drive. So hopefully, it should be pretty easy for you all to find, and I would love to see those retweets and those shares go up tonight.
I'm on it. Madam President, I'll go ahead and I'll follow directions and close out. And I just want to thank you for just staying on top of this. This voter suppression bill is bad. There's some questions with the constitutionality of it as well. And I do know that you all are geared up and will probably challenge this in the courts. But what I know we're here talking about this election bill, but I cannot express enough. This is a part of a larger narrative. When I say Jim Crow 2.0, I'm not saying it because it rings and it sounds good. It is real. As much as we see things on TV, there are many things that we do not see. We had a member on the floor today in his remarks, but he was quoting to make a point, and in doing so, he felt comfortable in using the word Negro. on the floor. This is Corey Bird, one of our members, if you go back and look at it. The reason why I share that is because the boldness, it continues to grow. You know, we started with this House Bill 1. Now we have this bill. Don't think that these are just bills for the session and whether they move or not. This is a bigger piece to the equation. So what you all are doing is very important. And I tell people the NAACP is needed now, you know, more than ever. We have to engage and stay engaged. And again, you know, I'm always NAACP proud, but I'm super proud of the branch that I belong to, because you all engage and you set the example. And trust me, because I am on other forums and I am doing things with other branches throughout the state, but that's because they always see it here first. So I want to thank you all, because it is tough up here, but we can't do it by ourselves. And your strength and your voice helps amplify what we're doing. So I'll close out by saying thank you very much to everyone that's participating. And we still got a lot of work to do. And let's continue to be engaged. NAACP proud, and we'll continue to get in some good necessary trouble.
Thank you. Mr. Scott?
Yeah, thank you. I'll definitely keep it brief. Leader DuBose, you know, it's hard to follow. What he just said is that absolutely correct. I mean, the NAACP has been doing, you know, obviously tremendous work for decades, and we know that the fight will continue. We know that this isn't over. Even regardless of what passes, they could come back next session and make it worse. You know, and what we'll have to do is we just have to change the dynamics in Tallahassee. You know, definitely, you know, we're definitely entering a period, and it's something that I think is really important for everybody to know, that we have entered a period that really started back in 2013 with the Shelby versus Holder decision in the Supreme Court, that really made it so that state governments could, you know, state governments that have a history of discriminating against our communities could then pass whatever voting laws they wanted to. After, you know, almost 50 years of not having that freedom, all these ideas were pinned up. And as soon as they had the freedom to do it, they just started rolling out these bills that are only designed to suppress the vote, and primarily designed to suppress the vote in our community. So the mission of the NAACP has never been more important than it is right now, because right now we are in probably one of the greatest eras of voter suppression that we have seen since the early 20th century. I mean, really, it's on that same level as far as trying to find ways to really knock us back and push us back and suppress our political power. And we have to do everything we can to push back on that and make sure that we are continuing to step forward as much as they try to push us back. So thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. And, you know, I look forward to being back, you know, really soon. And I look forward to talking to you all, you know, in other forums and offline as we discussed. And thank you again. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Scott. We are so glad that you are keeping of your campaign promises, and that you're staying on top of all of this this trickery that's going on in Tallahassee. We know that it is an extension of 45 and his folk, if we were to speak truth to power. I want you to know that you have a number of partners on this phone. I see a lot of members of the Divine Nine who have been previous partners and who will continue to offer their services to work in conjunction with you as well. And so we're excited about that. I would say that Broward has been very fortunate. I have you know, a number of counterparts across the state of Florida who have so much trouble working with their supervisor of elections. And it seems that the laws there were 67 counties, and they were interpreted 67 different ways. And we are certainly, Broward County is one of the fortunate ones that we've had partners in the organization to make sure that those individuals who were eligible to vote were able to register in comfort, and did everything we could to make sure that individuals got their votes cast and that it was counted. So it was very we were very proud to make sure that our work was not in vain last year, and we're going to continue to do that. And with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us. We will have other discussions as we continue. We're going to ask Leader DuBose to come back and share with us the final version of that bill. And also,
But Madam President, hopefully, SOE Scott and his optimism that the bill won't make it across the finish line will.
Well, hey, I know if the people on this call have anything to say about it, we would do everything we could to stop it.
Yes, sir.
But whether it passes or not, we still need to come back and discuss even current law again, so that we're all on the same page.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. Count me in. I would love to do it.
thank you so much. Minister Edwards, if you will close us out.
Let us go to the Lord in prayer. Eternal God, we thank you for what our ears have heard and our eyes have seen. God, now as we prepare to depart from this call, but never from your presence, we pray, God, that you would allow us to remain focused, to continue to pursue justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly before you, our God. Help us to serve, oh God, with integrity. Bless those who hold positions of authority. God, that you would be their guide and their covering. In Christ Jesus' name I pray, amen.
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 And those of you who are not members of the NAACP, it's not too late. We are, membership is open to everyone, and we have a large number of particularly Black population. So we need you at the table. The only thing missing from this struggle is you. Thank you so much and have a good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Be safe, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.